Dad said. "You're the most useless child we have." Everyone stared. I stood up and said, "You will regret those words." And 3 years later, he knocked on my mansion door, begging for food and forgiveness. Okay, Reddit, I need to get this off my chest. I'm sitting here in it's my mansion now, can you believe it? And I just served my dad a plate of food. A simple plate of carne asada, rice, and beans. But the weight of that plate, it feels like a goddamn ton of bricks. Let me explain. It didn't really start in Guadalajara. It started before that, back in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment where the smell of my mom's cooking clung to the walls like a second skin. Even then, Joaquin, my dad, had that restless ambition burning in his eyes, a hunger for something more. Guadalajara was just the first rung on the ladder he clawed his way up, brick by freaking brick, as he loved to remind everyone. He'd hold court at family gatherings, his voice booming with self-made pride, recounting every struggle, every triumph, every peso earned on his journey to building his empire. Then came the move to Atlanta. A bigger house, he said. Bigger opportunities, bigger everything. And yeah, the house was huge, sprawling, even. Like something out of a movie, with gleaming marble floors that echoed every footstep, and a backyard big enough to host a small festival. We had these massive family gatherings, every holiday, every summer. Barbecues that stretched on for days, the whole extended family crammed into the manicured lawn. Kids shrieking with laughter, music blasting from strategically placed speakers, the air thick with the aroma of grilling meat and the cloying sweetness of horchata. It was a lot. It was a performance, a carefully orchestrated display of success and familial bliss. My mom, bless her heart, would practically vibrate with nervous energy, flitting around like a hummingbird, ensuring every napkin was perfectly folded, every dish impeccably presented. Appearances were everything. Success was the only currency that mattered. My older brother, Ricardo, the lawyer, always impeccably dressed in his tailored suits, his handshake firm and confident. He'd regale everyone with anecdotes from his latest high-profile case, his voice smooth and assured. My sister, Sophia, the doctor, radiating competence in her crisp white coat, would casually drop mentions of medical conferences she'd attended, her accomplishments presented with a carefully cultivated air of humility. They were Joaquin's golden children, bathed in the warm glow of his approval, always exceeding expectations, always making him proud. Their achievements were constantly paraded around like prized show ponies, each ribbon and trophy a testament to Joaquin's success as a father. He'd beam, his chest puffed out like a proud rooster, basking in their reflected glory. And me? Well, I'm Adriana, the artistic one. The one who chose passion over the family business. I wanted to design clothes. I wanted to create. I could feel the weight of his disappointment pressing down on me every time the conversation drifted towards my aspirations. I'd sketch designs in my notebook, dreaming of vibrant fabrics and flowing silhouettes, but the moment Joaquin's gaze landed on me, my hand would freeze, the pencil hovering uncertainly over the page. He'd give me this tight-lipped smile, a barely perceptible shake of his head, and swiftly change the subject to Ricardo's latest legal victory or Sophia's groundbreaking research. It was like my dreams were an inconvenient stain on his otherwise pristine tablecloth, a messy splash of color on a canvas he wanted to keep starkly white. Even now, I can feel the familiar knot in my stomach, the way my throat would tighten, the heat rising in my cheeks every time he'd look at me with that mixture of pity and annoyance. "Adriana," he'd say, his voice laced with a condescending fondness, "when are you going to get a real job?" And my mom would rush in, her hand fluttering to my arm. "Oh, Joaquin, leave her be. She's just finding her way." But her words, meant to soothe, only amplified the sting of his dismissal. Those Atlanta summers, man, they were beautiful on the surface. Picture-perfect postcards of family unity. But underneath, there was this constant simmering tension, like a pot about to boil over, the scent of resentment and unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I'd retreat to my room, the laughter and mew, sick from the backyard, a muffled soundtrack to my growing frustration, clutching my sketchbook like a shield, the rough texture of the paper, a small comfort against the smooth, suffocating facade of our perfect family. The digs started subtly, little comments here and there, disguised as fatherly concern. "Adriana, mija," he'd say, his voice dripping with faux affection. "That art degree is lovely, but what are you going to do with it? How are you going to make a living?" Like my dreams were some frivolous hobby, something I'd eventually grow out of, like collecting stamps or playing with dolls. Every family gathering became a minefield of these backhanded compliments, each one chipping away at my already fragile confidence. He'd compare me to my siblings constantly. Ricardo just closed a multi-million-dollar deal. He'd announce, beaming, then turn to me with a sigh. "Adriana, are you still selling those, what do you call them? Etsy crafts?" The way he said Etsy crafts, like it was some childish game, made my stomach churn. I was selling on Etsy, trying to build my own small business, designing and sewing unique pieces. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. It was my passion, poured into every stitch and seam. But to him, it was nothing, a pathetic attempt at something real. Then there was the failed business venture. God, I still cringe thinking about it. I'd saved up every penny, poured my heart and soul into a small boutique, a place where I could showcase my designs and build my brand. It was a huge risk, but I was so sure it would work. I was naive. The boutique tanked, lasted barely 6 months. The shame was crushing. I felt like I'd let everyone down, mostly myself. And Joaquin? He didn't miss a beat. "See, Adriana?" he'd say, his voice laced with, "I told you so" smugness. This is what happens when you chase fantasies instead of focusing on something practical. Ricardo would have never made such a foolish mistake. Those words, man, they were like daggers twisting in my gut. I wanted to scream, to tell him he didn't understand, that it wasn't about the money, it was about creating something beautiful, something meaningful. But the words caught in my throat, choked by the heavy weight of his disapproval. Every interaction with him became a performance. I'd plaster on a smile, pretend his words didn't sting, try to deflect his criticisms with humor. But inside, I was crumbling. The constant comparisons, the subtle jabs, the unspoken disappointment. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of my self-worth. I started doubting myself. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was useless. Maybe I should just give up, get a real job, and conform to his expectations. The resentment simmered beneath the surface, a volatile mix of anger, sadness, and a desperate yearning for his approval, an approval I knew I'd probably never receive. It was exhausting. It was soul-crushing. And it was building towards something I didn't even know I was capable of. The air hung thick and heavy with the promise of a Georgia summer storm. The kind that rolls in slow and menacing, the sky bruised purple and green, the humidity clinging to you like a wet blanket. But for now, the sun was still shining, casting a deceptive golden glow over the manicured lawn, the sparkling pool, the overflowing buffet table groaning under the weight of my mom's meticulously prepared dishes. It was one of those perfect Atlanta afternoons, the kind Joaquin loved to showcase. Another family barbecue, another performance of familial harmony. The usual suspects were there. Ricardo holding court with a group of admiring relatives, his voice booming with lawyerly confidence. Sophia, effortlessly charming a group of her colleagues, her laughter light and melodic. And me, perched precariously on the edge of a wrought iron chair, nursing a glass of iced tea, trying to blend into the background like a chameleon. The smell of grilling meat hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sweet scent of hibiscus and the chlorine from the pool. Kids splashed and shrieked, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I remember the exact moment it happened. Ricardo had just finished recounting some thrilling courtroom drama, the details embellished for maximum dramatic effect. And Joaquin was beaming, his eyes practically glowing with paternal pride. He clapped Ricardo on the back, a hearty, booming la, escaping his lips. "That's my boy," he declared, loud enough for everyone within a 10-mile radius to hear. Then he turned to me, his smile fading, his eyes narrowing slightly. The shift in his demeanor was so subtle, so swift, that most people probably wouldn't have noticed. But I did. My stomach lurched. I knew what was coming. It was like watching a predator zero in on its prey. "Adriana," he said, his voice laced with a condescending sweetness that made my teeth ache. "When are you going to make me proud like your brother? When are you going to do something substantial with your life?" The casual cruelty of his words, delivered in front of everyone, stole the breath from my lungs. The laughter and chatter around us faded, replaced by a stunned silence. I could feel all eyes on me, the weight of their gazes pressing down like a physical force. My cheeks burned, my hands clenched around my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I tried to laugh it off, to deflect with a self-deprecating joke, the way I always did. "Oh, you know me, Papa," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle and unnatural. "I'm just a simple artist, not a high-powered lawyer like Ricardo." But the words felt hollow, even to my own ears. He didn't even crack a smile. He just shook his head, his lips pursed in disapproval. "Simple," he scoffed, the word dripping with disdain. "Simple is another word for useless." He paused, letting the word hang in the air like a toxic cloud. Then, as if to drive the point home, he added, his voice rising, "Adriana, you're the most useless child we have." The silence that followed was deafening. The clinking of glasses, the splashing of the pool, the laughter of the children, all of it vanished, swallowed by the gaping void of his words. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I could feel the blood draining from my face, my body going numb. It was like being slapped, hard, across the face, in slow motion, with everyone watching. The humiliation was a physical pain, a burning sensation that spread from my chest to my throat, choking me. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the ground, to become invisible. But I couldn't. I was trapped, pinned beneath the weight of his gaze, the weight of everyone's gaze. My eyes locked with his. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The humiliation curdled into rage, hot and potent. The years of subtle digs, the constant comparisons, the unspoken disappointment, it all came rushing to the surface, a tidal wave of resentment crashing over me. I could feel my hands trembling, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened my mouth, the words ripped from my throat, raw and ragged. "You will regret those words," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The words hung in the air, charged with an intensity that shocked even me. I turned and walked away, my back ramrod straight, the burning gaze of my family searing into my skin. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, shocked, maybe even a little afraid. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I was done. The world swam back into focus as I stumbled away from the patio, the echoes of Joaquin's words ringing in my ears. Useless. The word reverberated through me. A physical blow. My breath hitched in my throat, a sob trapped somewhere between my lungs and my lips. Hot tears welled, blurring the manicured lawn, the vibrant bougainvillea, the laughing faces of my family. They were laughing, weren't they? Or were they staring? Whispering? I couldn't tell. All I could feel was the burning shame, the raw humiliation of being dissected and discarded in front of everyone I knew, my own family. I stumbled blindly towards the French doors leading into the house, my vision a watery kaleidoscope of color and movement. My hand fumbled with the handle, the cool metal, a stark contrast to the fire raging inside me. I burst through the doors. The sudden silence of the air-conditioned house, a jarring shift from the boisterous laughter outside. The grand foyer, usually gleaming and pristine, seemed to tilt and sway around me. I grabbed onto a nearby marble column, the smooth, cold surface grounding me, anchoring me to reality. My chest heaved, each breath a ragged gasp. I could feel the tears streaming down my face, hot and salty against my skin. I swiped at them angrily, frustrated by my own weakness. Why was I crying? Why did his words have such power over me? I hated him. I hated myself for caring. I stumbled up the grand staircase, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. I reached my room, slamming the door shut behind me, the force of the impact rattling the framed artwork on the walls. I leaned against the cool wood, my body shaking uncontrollably. The room spun, a dizzying vortex of anger and humiliation. I sank to the floor, a crumpled heap of silk and tears. My carefully chosen outfit, a vibrant sundress I designed myself, felt like a costume, a flimsy disguise that had been ripped away, exposing the raw, vulnerable mess underneath. I buried my face in my hands, my sobs muffled by the thick carpet. I wanted to scream, to rage, to break something. Anything. The image of Joaquin's face, his lips curled into a sneer, his eyes filled with disdain, flashed through my mind. The memory of his words, dripping with contempt, echoed in my ears. Useless. The word was a brand, seared into my skin, a permanent mark of shame. A surge of anger, raw and powerful, coursed through me. It was like a jolt of electricity, a sudden, violent shift from humiliation to rage. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't let him break me. I would prove him wrong. I would show him and everyone else that I wasn't useless. I would build something real, something that would make even him take notice. I stood up, my legs shaky but resolute. I walked over to the full-length mirror, my reflection staring back at me, red-eyed and tear-streaked. I looked like a mess, but beneath the surface something had hardened. The fragile, insecure girl who craved her father's approval was gone. In her place was a steely determination, a burning desire to prove him wrong. I wiped away the tears, my gaze unwavering. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a newfound strength. I would not be defined by his words. I would define myself. And he would regret every single word he'd said. I grabbed my purse, a small but expensive leather bag. I wouldn't let him see me cry. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I stalked out of the room, my head held high, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I paused, glancing back towards the patio, towards the sounds of forced laughter and strained conversation. I could almost feel their eyes on me, questioning, judging, whispering. I took another deep breath, steeling myself against their scrutiny. Then, I turned and walked out the front door, leaving the suffocating facade of our perfect family behind. The humid air hit me like a wall, the scent of grilling meat now tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. I walked towards my car, the gravel crunching beneath my heels, each step a small victory. I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, not anymore. I needed to escape, I needed to breathe. I needed to find myself, far away from the suffocating shadow of Joaquin's disapproval. The drive was a blur. I blasted the radio, some angry, driving rock song I barely registered, the music a frantic counterpoint to the chaotic thoughts swirling in my head. Where was I even going? I had no plan, no destination. Just a desperate need to escape the suffocating pressure of that house, of my family, of him. Eventually, I found myself parked by the river, the Atlanta skyline, a jagged silhouette against the darkening sky. The air was thick with the coming storm, the humidity clinging to my skin like a second layer. I turned off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the pounding in my chest. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, the cool leather a small comfort against the burning heat in my cheeks. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of Joaquin's sneering face, the echo of his words. Useless. God, I hated that word. I hated him. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in the swirling vortex of my own emotions. The first fat drops of rain began to splatter against the windshield, the sound a rhythmic percussion against the silence. I finally looked up, the city lights blurred and distorted through the rain-streaked glass. I needed to get myself together. I needed to figure out what to do next. When I finally dragged myself back to the house, it was late. The party was winding down, the remnants of the barbecue scattered across the patio like casualties of war. The air, still thick with the smell of grilled meat, now carried an undercurrent of tension, a palpable awkwardness that clung to everything like the humidity. A few stragglers lingered, their voices hushed, their movements subdued. They all stopped talking when I walked in, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It was like walking into a goddamn wake. My mom rushed over, her face etched with worry. Adriana, Mia, where have you been? Your father's been worried sick? Worried sick? Right. More like worried I'd embarrassed him in front of his precious guests. I brushed past her, not trusting myself to speak. I could feel their gazes following me, burning into my back. Ricardo and Sophia intercepted me in the hallway, their faces a mixture of concern and something else. Pity? Annoyance? I couldn't tell. Adriana, Ricardo began, his voice carefully neutral. Dad didn't mean it, he gets carried away sometimes. Carried away? He publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family. That wasn't getting carried away, that was being a cruel, heartless asshole. Sophia chimed in, her voice soft and soothing, like she was talking to a frightened child. He's just worried about you, Adriana. You know how he is. Worried about me? Or worried about what people think of him having a useless daughter? I just stared at them, the silence stretching, thick and uncomfortable. I wanted to scream, to tell them to shut up, that they didn't understand, that they would never understand. But I didn't. What was the point? They were Joaquin's children, molded in his image, programmed to uphold the facade of our perfect family. They wouldn't understand the years of subtle digs, the constant comparisons, the crushing weight of his disapproval. They were the golden children, basking in the warmth of his favor. They didn't know what it was like to be the outcast, the disappointment, the useless one. I finally pushed past them, my voice a low, tight whisper. Just leave me alone. I retreated to my room, the sanctuary I'd created for myself within the suffocating confines of that house. I locked the door, the click of the latch, a small, defiant act of rebellion. I leaned against the cool wood, closing my eyes, willing myself to disappear. Later, my mom knocked softly on the door, a plate of food in her hands. She didn't mention Joaquin, didn't try to excuse his behavior. She just sat with me, holding my hand, her presence a silent comfort in the suffocating silence. She knew. She always knew. But she was trapped too, bound by the invisible chains of tradition and obligation. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. The unspoken understanding between us was a fragile lifeline in the turbulent waters of our family. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The remnants of the party had been cleared away, the patio scrubbed clean, the evidence of the previous night's drama erased as if it had never happened. Joaquin was gone, off on a business trip, as if nothing had happened. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge what he'd said. It was like he'd flipped a switch, erased the incident from his memory, expecting everyone else to do the same. And maybe they did. Maybe they were so used to his outbursts, his casual cruelty, that they'd learned to simply ignore it, to smooth it over, to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But I couldn't. His words, his dismissive attitude, his complete lack of remorse. It was like a final, brutal confirmation of everything I'd always suspected, that I didn't matter, that my feelings didn't matter, that I didn't matter to him. It was the final straw, the breaking point. Something inside me snapped, and in that moment, I made a decision. I would prove him wrong. I would show him, and everyone else, that I wasn't useless. I would build my own empire, bigger and better than his, and he would regret every single word he'd said. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and restless days. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, each repetition amplifying the humiliation, the sting of his words etching deeper into my soul. Useless. The word echoed in the empty chambers of my heart, a constant, throbbing reminder of my perceived inadequacy. I paced the confines of my room, the plush carpet worn thin beneath my restless feet, the LLS closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of his disapproval. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were haunted by his sneering face, his voice a relentless taunt, the barbecue scene playing out on an endless loop, each iteration a fresh wound. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the sheets twisted around my legs like a shroud. The silence of the pre-dawn hours was deafening, amplifying the turmoil within. The initial surge of anger, the fierce determination to prove him wrong, began to fade, replaced by a gnawing self-doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I being too sensitive? Maybe he was right. Maybe I was useless. Maybe I should just give up on my dreams, get a real job, and conform to his expectations. The thought was a bitter pill, a betrayal of the passion that had always burned within me, but the constant barrage of his criticism had taken its toll. The seed of doubt he'd planted had taken root, its tendrils wrapping around my heart, squeezing the life out of my dreams. I started questioning everything. Every choice I'd ever made, every path I'd ever considered. Had I been foolish to pursue my passion? Had I wasted years chasing a pipe dream? The fear of failure, always a lurking shadow in the background, now loomed large, threatening to consume me. I looked at my sketches, once a source of joy and inspiration, now tainted with a sense of futility. What was the point? I'd already failed once. What made me think I could succeed now? The silence of my room became oppressive, the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of my own inadequacy. I longed for the familiar buzz of the sewing machine, the feel of fabric beneath my fingertips, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful. But the fear held me back, a paralyzing grip that kept me chained to my doubts. I tried to distract myself. I buried myself in books, binge-watched mindless TV shows, anything to silence the relentless voice in my head. But the silence always returned, heavier, more oppressive than before. I felt adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainty, the shore of my dreams receding further and further into the distance. The doubt was an insidious poison seeping into every crevice of my being, eroding my confidence, my self-worth, my very sense of self. I started avoiding my family, the thought of facing their pity, their unspoken judgment, too much to bear. I'd lock myself in my room, the curtains drawn, the world outside shut out, lost in the labyrinth of my own despair. The once vibrant colors of my world faded to gray, the joy leached out, leaving only the hollow ache of disappointment. The thought of facing Joaquin again filled me with dread. The image of his disappointed face, his dismissive words, was a constant weight on my chest, a suffocating reminder of my failure. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing that look in his eyes again, the look that said, "I told you so." It was a vicious cycle, his disapproval fueling my self-doubt reinforcing his disapproval. I felt trapped, caught in a web of his making, unable to break free. I knew I needed to do something, anything, to break this cycle of self-destruction. But the motivation, the fire that had once burned so brightly within me, had been extinguished, leaving only ashes and the lingering scent of smoke. I was lost, adrift in a sea of doubt, with no compass to guide me, no anchor to hold me steady. I didn't know what to do, where to turn. I was drowning, and I didn't know if I had the strength to swim to shore. It's funny, isn't it? How life can twist and turn, how the things that once seemed so insurmountable can become almost insignificant. 3 years. It's been 3 years since that barbecue, since Joaquin's words ripped through me, leaving me shattered and adrift. 3 years of clawing my way back from the brink, of rebuilding myself, brick by painful brick. 3 years of sleepless nights, of ramen dinners, of working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, of pouring every ounce of my being into my designs, into my dream. There were moments, so many moments, when I wanted to give up, when the weight of it all felt too heavy to bear. When Joaquin's voice echoed in my head, whispering, "Useless, useless, useless," like a goddamn mantra. I'd see his face in the crowds, in my dreams, that smug, dismissive look haunting me, mocking me, fueling the fire in my belly. But I didn't give up. Something inside me, some stubborn, defiant spark, refused to be extinguished. I channeled the anger, the hurt, the burning desire to prove him wrong into my work. I poured every ounce of my being into my designs, into building my brand, into creating something beautiful, something meaningful, something mine. I sacrificed everything. Relationships, friendships, even my own health. I lived and breathed my work, fueled by the bitter taste of rejection, the burning desire for validation. And slowly, painstakingly, it started to pay off. First, a small online store, then a pop-up shop, then a collaboration with a local boutique. Each small victory was a validation, a flicker of hope in the darkness. The whispers started, then the murmurs, then the outright buzz. My designs were being noticed. People were talking. And then, the big break, a feature in a major fashion magazine. My phone started ringing off the hook. Investors, collaborators, retailers, they all wanted a piece of the Adriana magic. And now I'm here, sitting in my own goddamn mansion, overlooking the city that once felt so cold and indifferent. A mansion, bigger, grander, more opulent than anything Joaquin could have ever imagined. The irony isn't lost on me. It's almost poetic. The marble floors gleam beneath my feet, the same cool, smooth surface that once offered me solace in the midst of my turmoil. The walls are adorned with my own designs, vibrant splashes of color against the pristine white backdrop. The air is filled with the scent of fresh flowers, a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of horchata that permeated every corner of Joaquin's house. This is my space, my sanctuary, my triumph. And then he showed up, Joaquin, standing on my doorstep, looking smaller than I remembered, older, weary, defeated. The expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, his shoulders slumped, his once booming voice reduced to a hesitant murmur. The restless ambition that once burned in his eyes had been replaced by a dull flicker of, what, regret? Plea? I couldn't tell. He asked for help. His business, the empire he'd built with his own 2 hands, was crumbling. He needed a loan, a bailout, from me, the useless one, the one he'd dismissed, ridiculed, discarded, the one he'd told would never amount to anything. I stood there, looking at him, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. Pity, satisfaction, a flicker of triumph? I couldn't deny the satisfaction, the sweet, heady rush of vindication. But beneath that, there was something else. A weariness, a sadness, a recognition that this wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It wasn't the triumphant, I told you so moment I'd craved for so long. It was just sad. I invited him in, led him to the dining room, the same room where I'd spent countless hours sketching designs, dreaming of a future he couldn't envision. I served him a plate of food, carne asada, rice and beans, the same simple meal my mom used to make in our cramped Guadalajara apartment, the aroma filling the air with a familiar comfort. He ate in silence, his eyes downcast, his movements slow and deliberate. I watched him, the years of resentment, of anger, of hurt, slowly dissolving, leaving behind a strange emptiness. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. His silence, his humility, his very presence in my house, asking for my help, it was an apology in itself, and in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need his validation. I had found it within myself, The plate of food wasn't an act of revenge, not a power move. It was an offering. An act of grace? Humanity? I don't know. So Reddit, AITA, was I wrong to serve him that plate of food after everything he said? Was it a power move, or was it just human?